The Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery covers 354 acres. It is an important green lung to the environment and the quality of life of the Malaysian capital. The Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery is not only the country's largest Chinese cemetery, but it has also witnessed the development of Kuala Lumpur over a century and the contributions made by the Chinese ancestors. From a sparsely populated marshland to a densely populated metropolitan. The Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery reflects the features of Chinese religious beliefs, culture and customs. It is an asset of the Chinese community and the nation. Meanwhile, the founder of Kuala Lumpur, like Kapitan Yap Aloy and others, are laid to rest there. Therefore, Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery represents the importance of the Chinese in nation building. It is an important monument that has witnessed the sacrifices of our forefathers in the process of capital development. Kuala Lumpur will be soulless if it is without the Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery. The Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery is an independent non-governmental organization. Its management is formed by representatives of Selangor and Federal Territory Kwang Siu Association, Federal Territory and Selangor Fui Chu Association, Selangor and Kuala Lumpur Teochew Association, Kuala Lumpur and Selangor Ka Yin Association, Selangor and Federal Territory Hainan Association, and Selangor and Federal Territory Cha Yang Association. The management of the Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery has absolute autonomy in managing the cemetery. There was only a small population in Kuala Lumpur during the set-up period. Chinese immigrants would bury the remains of the demise at the surrounding areas of the current Stadium Negara at Jalan Hang Tuah, Pudu Jail, and Maybank headquarters. The vicinity was laden with abandoned graves. In order to resolve the funeral matters of the Chinese immigrants once and for all, Kapitan Yap Aloy subsequently initiated the establishment of Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery and filed an application to the colonial government for the burial ground. Although the colonial government had granted a piece of burial ground to Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery, it was short of resources in the early days. The management of the Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery went around raising funds. With meticulous planning and being thrifty, the management eventually completed the construction of Fu De Chi and built the road. The burial ground started being used to address the demands for Chinese funerals. In 1920, the British colonial government awarded a 48-acre piece of land as burial grounds to the Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery under the 1911 Land Act and published it in the Federation of Malaya Gazette. In 1922, the Wu Feng Bridge was built. In 1924, the Hui Long Bridge was built. In 1924, the volunteer name list of Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery was released. It stated that the Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery was founded in the year 1895. An additional 12 pavilions, Hua Chiang Ting, Shi An Ting, Mu Yi Ting, Yuan Wang Ting, Yi Chui Ting, Wang Yun Ting, Qing Xia Ting, Yang Zhi Ting, Li Shan Ting, Xi Ying Ting, Jiran Ting Archway. In 1935, the management of Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery had raised 20,000 ringgit to buy shop lots in Petaling Street area as an investment and to generate rental revenue. From the year 1942 to 1945, Malaya was ruled by the Japanese with the outbreak of World War II. In times of war, the Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung management had suspended their activities. In 1947, the management of Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery donated a piece of land to the Selangor China Refugees War Aid Foundation to raise relief funds to build a Nanyang Fallen Warriors of Anti-Japanese Occupation Monument. In 1958, the Malaya government granted the approval for a piece of 50-acre burial ground at Jalan Sungai Besi to Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery. In 1960, the foundation stone laying ceremony was held at the Sungai Besi Cemetery. On the 5th of January 1964, the Sungai Besi Cemetery was officially opened. In 1968, the Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery management converted the site of an old temple at Jalan Dewan Bahasa into a double-story funeral parlour. In 1970, the funeral parlour was completed. The Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery was almost fully occupied by the late 1980s. In order to resolve this problem, the previous management had taken a number of reclamation projects, including earth filling, refurbishing the coffin pit, reclaiming occupied land by squatters and factory. Besides that, the Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery management also promoted cremation, the placement of ash urns in the Ashes Pagoda for environmental needs, and set to change the burial method. In 1981, the construction of the Ashes Pagoda started. On the 14th of September 1983, a groundbreaking ceremony of the Ashes Pagoda was held. 2 years later, construction work of the Ashes Pagoda was completed on the 7th of May 1985. The 5-story Ashes Pagoda that cost more than 3 million ringgit was named Guangyi Pagoda, officiated on the 28th of July 1985. On the 22nd of October 1985, the first batch of urns was placed in the Guangyi Pagoda. Since 1982, the government had requited the land of Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery for road development purposes. In early May 1982, the government planned to construct a road at the front of the National Palace, passing through Jalan Dewan Bahasa to connect with Jalan Sungai Besi. There were about 190 graves, 50 new graves near the Kui Chai Temple, and over 100 wooden homes affected. In early August 1991, the government requited 7 acres of burial ground at Jalan Sungai Besi to build an alternate road linked to Taman Konot and Bandar Tun Razak. In April 1993, the Public Works Department re-acquitted a piece of land of about 16 acres of Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery in order to widen the new road from the Kuala Lumpur Seremban Highway to the front of the National Palace. In early 1994, the Public Works Department re-quitted another section of burial ground at Taman Konot, adjacent to Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery. More than 390 children's graves were affected. In 1995, the Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery celebrated its 100th anniversary. It organized the maiden 7 days and nights Ulambana festival to promote filial piety. Proceeds from the Dharma function would be donated to the cultural, educational and charitable organizations, hence adding greater significance to the centenary celebrations. As Kuala Lumpur transformed into a metropolitan, the previous outskirts of Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery had become the capital's city centre. According to the estimation, the market value of Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery was worth more than 2.2 billion ringgit. Such a piece of precious land was definitely a lure for many. In October 1994, the government even announced its intention to recall cemeteries for redevelopment. This could be defined as the prelude to the turmoil of Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery's relocation. As early as 22nd October 1996, the Prime Minister summoned a representative from one of the Chinese clan associations, stated that the government intended to develop the city comprehensively, so the cemeteries must be relocated to enhance the national image and enrich Kuala Lumpur. Since the proposal came from the Prime Minister, thus it gradually formed a viewpoint and the common sense of, under the impact of development, cemeteries are bound to be relocated. In early 1997, Prime Minister Datuk Seri Dr. Mahathir began to intervene in the cemetery relocation matters. This irked a rebound in the Chinese community. The reasons why they opposed the relocation were that it would be breaching the Chinese taboos, hurting the Chinese traditional, spiritual and cultural beliefs, and also destroying historical monuments and relics of the cemeteries. The relocation would also wipe out the most important monuments of the Chinese community that marked their contributions towards capital building. On the 20th of April 1998, Prime Minister Datuk Seri Dr. Mahathir expressed his views for the first time. He said that it was unfit for urban areas to have cemeteries. Cemeteries in the urban areas must be relocated whenever necessary. If the views of all must be asked prior to any development, then many of the plans will not be executed. The 6 founding associations of Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery had reached a consensus. They decided to insist on non-relocation of the cemetery. The management of Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery, Kwang Si Cemetery and Hokkien Cemetery also made their stance of opposing the relocation. The Chinese community also pressurized Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery through the mass media, demanding it to fight for the best conditions for relocation. Go Bok Yen, an urban planning and traffic planning consultant, proposed the listing of Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery as a historical and cultural heritage in order to achieve a balance between urban development and humanities. The mass response and opinions thus awakened the Chinese community. It became the wave of objections to cemetery relocation. At the end of 1998, the Kuala Lumpur City Mayor issued an order to seal the cemeteries. Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery had finally met with a seal-off crisis. It immediately prohibited any burial service. On the 16th of July 2000, about 200 delegates from 42 Chinese clan associations, organizations, cemeteries, management and political parties in Kuala Lumpur and Selangor attended the Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery Relocation Dialogue, organized by Kuala Lumpur and Selangor Kwang Siu Association. The results from this dialogue directly affected the survival of Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery, which was crucial to the Chinese community. The large-scale dialogue concluded unanimously with a resolution of opposing the relocation of Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery and urging the cabinet to reinstate the decision. On the 17th of July 2000, members from the Kuala Lumpur and Selangor Chinese Assembly's Cemetery Defend and Beautification Pro Tem Committee proceeded to the Parliament building to distribute a questionnaire on relocation of cemeteries at Jalan Dewan Bahasa dan Pustaka, feedback from the members of Parliament, to highlight the matter to the MP's attention and to garner their support. On the 19th of July 2000, the Cabinet announced that the cemeteries will not be relocated. The Kuala Lumpur and Selangor Chinese Assembly's Cemetery Defend and Beautification Pro Tem Committee briefing was held at the auditorium of Sun Jin High School. There was a total of 421 representatives from 131 organizations who attended the briefing. They sealed their stamps to show their objection on cemetery relocation. Chairperson of the briefing requested the government to list Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery as a historical heritage. The committee's secretary also reported about details of the cemetery, the reasons of staying put, beautification solutions and other agendas. The beautification of the cemetery was the utmost important task for the management of the Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery after the Malaysian government had announced that the cemetery would not be relocated. The cemetery beautification proposal had identified 8 major spots for refurbishment, which included Guang Yi Pagoda, the administration office, the funeral parlour, the graves of Kapitan Yap Ah Loy and Chu Yok, etc. The redevelopment of the Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery costed 2 million ringgit. The first phase of the beautification work costed 60,000 ringgit. The work of resurfacing and beautification of Kapitan Yap Ah Loy's grave had been completed. A monument on its completion was launched on the 20th of July 2000. It was the grandest occasion ever. A MCA minister officiated the Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery auspicious and prayers for the deceased Dharma function. As time changes, modern people are geared towards fashion and aesthetics. The management of Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery can no longer be conservative and passive. Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery is a historical cemetery. Historical buildings in the cemetery include Guang Yi Pagoda, Nanyang Fallen Warriors of Anti-Japanese Occupation Monument, Han Jian Ting, and the cemetery of Kuala Lumpur founder Kapitan Yap Ah Loy. After the implementation of beautification works, the management of Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery decided to name it Heritage Park to attract domestic and foreign historical and cultural enthusiasts to visit it. After years of efforts, the whole of Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery has been revamped. It brought a new lease of life to the city, offering a comfortable and tranquil space, civilized and elegant. The Yap Ah Loy Memorial was opened on the 22nd of April 2006. It recorded the struggles of our forefathers and the hardship of the establishment of Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery. It reflects the determination of the management of the Kuala Lumpur Kwang Tung Cemetery to preserve